Arizi bunkek nigegisku kes moa begware begis inuge Kengi guinari asusultisni kos pemel sibul asud misnigu One gammo wejin doltibusni keidu disnek Tandel mi majun CD.
In 1857, the Canadian government officially enacted the Gradual Civilization Act. The goal of this legislation was to assimilate Canada's First Peoples into European culture. To accomplish this, Aboriginal children were taken from their homes and forced to attend residential schools. More than 150,000 Native children were sent to residential schools. There, the children were subjected to harsh conditions, brutal discipline, physical and sexual abuse. The last residential school closed in Saskatchewan in 1996.
I'm from Wukumagang, Manitoulin Island. I was born and raised there. I was raised by my mother and father. All the rest of my sisters and brothers went to residential school except the oldest. My father's philosophy was always, it is time to work, it is time to play, and it is time to pray, and it is time to sleep.
I'm from the Curve Lake First Nation, and as far back as I can remember, when I was a little kid, I used to love playing in the bushes and all that, and the swamps and everything that the little kids love to do, eh?
I used to play all over the place and have a great time down here. It was a good life, yes.
The next morning at breakfast is when he said that you are going to stay home for 3 years, and I'm going to teach you for the next 3 years. I want one of my daughters to know the language and culture. All the other your sisters and brothers are coming back home and they don't know the language or they've changed. That's the bargain that he made, and I knew that I was going to go. So I think it was about the last year that they start preparing me, like, what is your name? What is, do you know your prayers? And do you pee-pee? That was very important. So all those English words, I memorized them. So when I went to school, in the residential school, when the nuns asked me what my name was, I was so proud to say, my name is Shirley Pheasant.
When I turned almost 7 years old, I was taken up to the old schoolhouse in Curve Lake, and I was given a bath and a change of clothes, along with my 3 older sisters at that time. And the government people, or whoever was there, told us that we're going to go out the reserve to get a bite to eat.
My dad and my grandmother took us to Toronto to put us on a train to go to north to Chapleau. And my dad couldn't stand to see his boys leave. So he ran out of the coach crying. I still remember him crying. Then they come and took us away, you know, that really messed up my life.
One of the things that I remember was a young man, I don't know how old he was, but he was very upset and he was running with an axe. And he threatened to hit anybody with this axe if they come near him. And the fathers were running, chasing, you know, the father, the priest. And then the rest of the community members were chasing after him, telling him that he should get on the bus and go because he had to go to school. That's what I remember. And I remember him because after residential school, when he came out, he didn't live a good life. He turned to alcohol. He died from alcohol also, passing out. I always wondered what really happened to him. Why was he so reluctant to go to school? But he was forced to.
And they took me and my 3 older sisters off the reserve and took us to Brantford, Ontario, to the Mohawk Institute. And that's where I became a number 39 for 10 years, and they took away my name.
The Reverend picked us up at the train station. He's the minister there. He's the school principal also. He picked us up at the train station, took us into the 2 miles back into the school, and that's where this horrible tale begins.
As soon as the bus went in, the gates closed. And when the gates closed, I think there was something happened to me. It was like as if it was locked. And that was my experience in going into the residential school.
That first day, it was really scary, you know. I didn't really know. I can't really explain the feelings of fear, because I was so small, and I cried because I missed my parents, and I cried when they took me away from my sisters in that little office at the Mohawk Institute. And I was really fearful because all I seen was eyes staring at me.
The day-to-day life, you got up about 6 in the morning, and the older boys went down to the barn to milk the cows, feed the cows, feed the horses, feed the chickens, and then you come back, had breakfast, then you went to school. The first job I had there was milking a cow. You milked her twice a day, recorded the weight, you weigh your bucket on the weigh scale, and then entered in a book.
And then you were to church at 7 o'clock. After that, there would be another bell, and there'd be breakfast time. Then there would be a bell, and you had about 15 minutes to do your chores or whatever you had to do. We all had jobs.
It's much like a prison. Well, it is a prison, but with no handcuffs or leg irons. Because they have the same routine, the same thing as the prisons do. You got to line up. You gotta go for your clothes change, you got to do everything the prison does today.
We're always hungry up there, and we used to eat the bran and the oats from the horses. We used to eat them. So you eat the oats, chew it in your mouth to get all the good out of it, and spit the chaff out, you know. And the bran was straight eating. It was pretty good, and that's why they had to lock it up.
The dormitory was split in 4 different ways, and on this side was juniors, and then there was, well, there was babies. We'll call them babies. It was nice because you know that somebody was sleeping quite close to you in the next bed that you know. It wasn't very nice if you didn't get along with that girl.
The school environment was really bad. I think all the time I was there, we had one qualified teacher, Miss Rutherford. I still remember her. She's a great teacher. The rest of them, where they picked them up, I don't know, but they weren't teachers.
So sometimes the classes would be taken out of the classroom to go and work, such as digging potatoes or farm work or whatever, or doing laundry.
No, it was bad. Like we'd line up in the morning. If we didn't line up fast enough at the residential school for breakfast, we'd get hauled off by the in a row by the ear and set in a little room, and we'd miss our breakfast, you know, and or we'd get a big strapping on the hand with a big thick strap, and we'd go without meals a lot of times. Not only me, but a lot of new guys that came in, you know. It happened to each of us out there as we was growing up there.
Getting beat, you're always hungry, and worked to death. There's no hardly any time for young children want to get out playing, you know.
Discipline was scary. It depended on what you did. The most offense was, or the greatest offense that one can make was to speak in the language. So you got a strap.
And if we stepped out of line a little bit, or if the boys' masters heard us speaking or whispering, we'd get hauled out of the lineup and just beaten, you know, with a big strap, or, you know, grabbed by the ear, and it would really hurt, you know, because the big men used to really hurt the little kids, you know.
It was like a rope, but it was rubber. It hurts you pretty well when it hurts you when somebody hits you with the rubber, especially on your hand or on your legs.
Mr. McKinley, he's the guy who used to be the fireman at the school. He's walking there to fire the boilers up. We met him. He's, "Hi, children." Everybody hollered out, "Hi, Mr. McKinley." I says, "Hello." And as soon as I said hello, I got a backhander right across the face. There's blood and snot flying all over the place. That lady there gave me a backhander. She said, I said, "Why did you hit me?" She says, "It's Mr. McKinley to you, not just hello."
Sometimes it was done in the open so that the student would be used as an example for all the girls to see, which caused humiliation towards the girl.
And he turned away from her because he didn't know what she said. And as he turned away, she gave him a box in the ear, a real flat hand. And you hear that little kid scream. There's blood coming down his ear. Broke his eardrum.
But because it was one size bigger, it sagged a little bit. and so my flesh showed. And I don't know, they always talk about skin or flesh or I don't know. And something, it seemed that it was seemed dirty. And so when she saw me with that dress, she said, "What's your mother doing to you? Is she trying to make a whore out of you?" My mother is a very church-going woman. She goes to church every Sunday. And I says, you know, she wouldn't be doing that. And when I finished that sentence, you know, she says, "You're very bold." Since I'm going down, we're going to go and see the superintendent. And when we got down to the superintendent's office, she was at the door, and she went in first. She went and told her story first, and then my story second. So the superintendent didn't blame me, so that's how I got the strap. And I stood by the post for, I think, 2.5 days.
The traumas of nightmares of being sexually abused and getting beaten by bigger boys or eating at the city dump in Brantford. You know, I learned how to survive at a really early age, and I became institutionalized at an early age.
That was the you know, that broke the camel's back, because getting punished for protecting my mother. That was the reason why I quit school. Well, I was 16. They couldn't make me go back to school.
When the government people took me back, there was a little old lady coming out of this house in Curve Lake, and she had something in her hand, which I later found out it was wine, But when she first came out, she had this bottle of alcohol in her hand, and she was staggering, and she says, "Oh, there's my little baby boy." You know, after 10 years, it was a shock, a culture shock to me. It's like one of my paintings there. And fear set in again, the same kind of fear that I had when I first went to the Mohawk Institute. And I figured, well, this lady must be my mom. So like a fool, I took a drink of what she had to fit into the Curve Lake First Nation again.
Well, my mother got married again, you see. See, my dad was killed while I was up there. My dad was murdered when I was in Chaplow. So they told me my dad died, and I said, "How did he die?" He says, "A mining accident." I told the person there's no mines in Peterborough then. That's what they told me.
First few weeks was kind of terrible, because I was always sitting around, but I didn't know why. One day my mother said, you know, she looked at me, and she was wondering why I wasn't picking up, you know, sewing. She used to make birch bark crafts and things like that. And so she said one day, "There's not enough time within a day to do all of the work that we have to do. Just take a look around and do what you have to do." And I was thinking, sitting like that, and I thought, why am I not moving? And here I was waiting for her to ring the bell so that I could get started.
Oh, no, there was no bonding when I came back. When I went to Curve Lake, there was no bonding or feelings of friendliness or love from anybody, really, because I guess they were ashamed of what happened to me.
She wasn't there when I needed her. My dad wasn't there when I needed it for direction or anything, so how could it actually be a mother-son relationship? She is a lady that brought me into this world. I thank her for it, and that's all. That's it. How can I do anything else? I don't know her.
But during those 10 years that I was away, like I say, I forgot their names, And during those 10 years, they had 5 other kids. I was the youngest when I left. But when I came back to Curve Lake at the age of 16, going on 17, my parents had 5 other kids, and they were full-fledged alcoholics then. I don't know how to explain it, but alcohol took over my life. It covered up my pain and anger, but then it started getting to me. I was abusing it. It took over my whole life, and I landed in prison.
I stayed with my family here till I had 18, and I went to Toronto. I worked in Toronto for 4 years, and I got out of there, and I went to the military. I hit the booze pretty bad there for a while, until my officer says to me, he says, your health is failing, Howard, and he says, I advise you to get off the booze, which I did. And that was in 1968, I quit drinking. I haven't had a drink since, 43 years ago.
2 of my brothers got into alcohol. My brother, the youngest one, I suspect that he was sexually abused, but he never talked about it.
What I'm today is what the government people, the residential schools, made me be. And then when I came back to Curve Lake, when I started landing in problems with the law, because during those 10 years, I developed a hatred towards authority due to my beatings and the sexual abuse from the ones I was supposed to trust, you know, and it was a hard life for a bit after that. And I've done close to about 8 years inside the prison walls after the 10 years in the residential school due to my my residential school traumas.
I knew that we needed money, so I decided to go to work. So I went to work, and my first job was in a hospital. First pay that I got is I went to the drugstore and I got white powder and lipstick. And I realized that you're more accepted if you're white, and rather than if you had brown skin. And so I hated myself for being a different color. I think when you devalue a human being, there is a psychological damage that is being done to a human being. And so that's what the institutions have done, along with the missionaries and the government.
Many a time I thought back, if I just could have had my childhood, you know, and that's the worst thing that ever can happen to a human being, is deprive him of his childhood. Just not too far from the school was all civilian housing. We seen this house there, they had a horse. So we all went into the barn snooping. We found where they kept the oats for the horse. It's in a bin, eh? So we all started eating these oats, see? And the lady of the house, she come out and she caught us. She says to us, "You kids stay right there." She says, "I'll be right out." About 20 minutes later, she come out. She had a big platter of tomato sandwiches with real butter. And did we ever eat them tomato sandwiches down? When I retired, I had a lot of time. I started asking people in Chapel about this, who lived in that house. So I phoned them, and I told them we'll be up there on the 26th of July. We want to visit. I looked at her, and I went and gave her a hug. I'm one of the guys that's stealing the oats off your horse in the 40s. You were one of the guys? Yeah. You brought out tomato sandwiches to us. Oh, my God, she says. Just a minute, I said, I'm going out the car. I went out the car, and I got a big 6-quart basket of tomatoes I picked off my garden. I said, here, I got to pay you back. She said, oh, thank you.
The doctor saw me one time when I was scrubbing the floor, and the doctor said, I overheard him say to the nurse, what is she doing scrubbing floors? Why not train her? She's smart enough to train her to be a nurse's aide. So that's how I got to be a nurse's aide. That was really something, because I was so used to being called dummy or stupid. And, for him, I mean, I was in glory, I think, for the rest of the night that day, that I got promoted to a better job.
You know, if you're ignorant of the fact, you're ignorant of the fact because you don't know nothing about it. But you make them knowledgeable of what's going on, and, it's a different story, And it's hard to believe for a lot of people. It's very hard to believe.
I needed to forgive myself and forgive other people. And how do you do that? Well, looking at the forgiveness, I really had to read a lot of books about forgiveness. And how do you learn to forgive yourself? So there's a word about forgiveness, and we call it punigite tadwin, and means punige means to stop something. And because I think if we let that anger still fester, you're not going to have a good life. Well, no, I think if an angry person, if you ever see one, is not living a very happy life. So I wanted to find that happy life. I wanted to live a good life.
A lot of elders come to my table, all right? And they say, hey, Freddie, you got a lot of pain and anger. And come to our sweat lodge or come to our smoke ceremonies and all that, and we'll pray for you. A lot, not only my elders, but all kinds of church religions come to my table and they say, hey, Freddie, you got to believe in God, you got to believe in Jesus, you got to believe in Jehovah, you got to believe in the native culture, you got to... I tell my elders, to me, that's bullshit. That stuff was beaten out of me. That was raped out of my system when I was just a little baby. And it took many years out of my life of hardships and pain and anger and lash it out at the society in order for me to find my personal creator today, which has carried me comfortably, wisely for the last 26 years. And that's all I can say about that. I'm well on the way of healing. And I'll never heal, I know. I'll never heal. I'll carry this trauma and the memories of that residential school just like if it happened yesterday, to the day of my life. But the Creator gave me a gift just for today to bury that stuff so I won't hurt myself and the people around me.
I'm still here. I still got brown skin. And we're getting stronger.
Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission was established as a part of the settlement of a class action lawsuit filed by residential school survivors. It was the largest class action lawsuit ever filed in Canadian courts. On June 10, 2009, 3 commissioners were appointed to head the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The Commission's mandate is to accumulate, document, and commemorate the experiences of the 80,000 living residential school survivors. The Commission holds national, regional, and community events across the country, bringing survivors together to share their stories. In May 2012, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission gathered in Peterborough, led by Commissioner Marie Wilson.
Our TRC belief statement, which we wrote, is that we are here, all of us, in respect of the child taken and the parent left behind. And we feel that's so significant because if there is one universal entry point to this story, it is surely that.
I think it's enormously important to be made aware of this particular story in our history, and one that we need to recognize, one that we need to seek forgiveness for.
And we're putting that out there so that Canadians and people in this area and people in Ontario or people of the world can actually hear our truth.
Because this is a part of Canadian history and nobody knows about it, and people should know what their culture and government did.
Having the opportunity and sitting and hearing the truth and speaking the truth and just being present is really big.
For all of us who are parents or grandparents, aunties or uncles, we can understand in our hearts the devastation it would be if someone came along and claimed children, the little children in our lives, and said, from here on in, we are taking them away. And no, you can't do anything about that.
These people were taken away as little children from their mothers and fathers and their grandmothers.
My grandmother, when I left, she was grieving.
Even though I never experienced the residential school, I have that emptiness in my heart of what our young went through.
I missed my siblings, my mother.
And in some cases, all the children were gone.
Loss of family, loss of culture.
And I thought I left the entire world to what I knew. I thought I was in a different country.
Growing up without knowing their language, without knowing their clans, without knowing their Ongwahoe name or their Anishinaabe name. And those things are really important to us. They give us a sense of belonging.
For many people, not even knowing who their siblings were, not their cousins, and going home and not recognizing their grandparents or their parents.
When they got reunited, they didn't know how to interact with each other. That social connection had been taken away.
A sense of I didn't belong here, and when I'm home, I didn't belong there either.
You felt terrible.
It was never a good policy gone wrong. It was a policy that had intentions that we would today consider wrong-headed from the very beginning.
It's a form of racism. It was a form of annihilation.
So horrifyingly racist.
A blot on our history that we must face and assume responsibility for and recognize our participation in.
A legacy of distrust, resentment, anger, and deep personal injury.
It tore us apart.
In fact, not only was it not right, it was by today's standards illegal, and it was by any standards in human rights law immoral and unethical.
When my book on red schools was reviewed by a colleague in one of the academic journals, he kept saying, after he would talk a bit about the book, he'd start saying, but of course Molloy's angry. I didn't realize I was angry until I read the review, but then when I began to think about it, I realized that when I spoke in public, for example, about the schools, that levels of emotion were pretty close to the surface.
And I tell you, as I listen, I see a new dimension in myself and a new understanding of what we were a part of and what we've got to rebuild together.
I thought I was a cool Scot, right, who could wade through anything, but no, it's pretty depressing, both reading about it and listening to it. lives destroyed, lives wasted, lives badly damaged, for no good purpose at the end of the day.
And our great hope is that at the end of our mandate, we will have wedged open enough doors and there will be enough willing broad shoulders stuck into it that it can never slam shut again.
On June 11, 2008, Prime Minister Stephen Harper rose in the House of Commons and apologized for Canada's residential school program.
The Government of Canada sincerely apologizes and asks the forgiveness of the Aboriginal peoples of this country for failing them so profoundly. Nous le regrettons. We are sorry. Nimi tatenan, nimin jinowe samin, mamiak tukut.
We received a significant federal apology, and some of you will be very aware of it. But what will come after that? Will there be anything?
What I can say from a general Aboriginal perspective is that was an extremely important symbol. But the apology apologized for the fact of residential schools having taken place. They were very sorry for the atrocities that were committed against Aboriginal people.
And one assumes, I was raised as a good Catholic boy, that the apology meant that one behaved differently in the future. So we had the "I sorry," and then we had the cancelling of the Colonial Court. Then we had the closing of the Aboriginal Healing Foundation. Then we had the gutting of the Aboriginal Language Program. And over the last 3 weeks, we've had what? How many Aboriginal programs have been gutted by the government? They're just not going to put any money into it.
Absolutely no hand has been extended by the federal government, who has assumed jurisdiction over Indians and Indian lands.
Meech Lake, and every sort of eventuality. Saskatchewan a few years ago when everybody came to Peterborough. At Awapiskat this year, right? I mean, it's a sort of blazing story for a day or a week, and then it goes away. And then we forget about it, and then we don't do anything about it.
People have often said to me, "Kelly, why don't your people just rise up?" Oh yeah, that's interesting. Why don't we just rise up? I hadn't thought of that. No, I'm being a bit cheeky, but there are a host of reasons why we're not just rising up.
Aboriginal people don't have any of the tools to make a case within democratic institutions.
All of those tools of democracy that we take for granted and that we think have always been there, they certainly have not always been there for one of the three founding nations of Canada, the First Nations, Inuit and Métis.
These are people who have no numbers. Even if they all got together in one place in Canada, they might elect, 2 members of Parliament? And they have no economic strength. They're not important for the conduct of the Canadian economy. There's no penalty for ignoring them if you're the Prime Minister or a provincial Premier.
They've taken it upon themselves to control a vast part of the population in Canada, yet they're not acting in accordance with their fiduciary obligations in order to fix it.
And it's always thus. I mean, the story of res schools was one in which, the government said in 1869, Macdonald's government, we're going to help these people to become Canadians like all others. And then didn't put any money into the process, right? Ran lousy schools, didn't feed the children. And it just keeps going on and on and on.
What's needed? A vast change in the funding initiatives, mental health initiatives, addictions, recovery initiatives, that type of thing is sorely needed.
Say pretty words and don't deliver, and at the next election, no one's going to stand up and say, hold it here a second. You haven't improved the Aboriginal condition, and therefore you don't deserve our votes. The day that happens, I'll know something really important happened in this country. But there's no great sign of it yet. And you can have all these events as the Commission is having, and it's relatively easy to get Aboriginal people to come, and one admires their courage for their arrival and their public truth-telling, as difficult emotionally as that is for them. But if that's the only people that show up, we're not going to take a step forward.
Still too many Canadians think that this TRC and all that surrounds it is about Aboriginal people, that it has nothing to do with them.
If the president of the CAW doesn't show up and say to Harper and others, enough's enough, we have to forge a different future, and we have a powerful organization here, or Wayne Gretzky stands up and says, this is not my Canada if you keep going the way you're going. And we've got to be able to bring the sort of public non-Aboriginal pressure to Aboriginal relations in this country that we brought to South Africa.
one which is truly reflective of respectful relations between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal Canadians. In other words, among all the founding nations of Canada.
And build a new and creative country with our Indigenous people.
And that we begin to live up in an intentional way to the promise, to the covenant that was described in treaties, both ancient treaties and modern-day treaties.
In Australia, we had a prime minister when the story broke, right, about the stolen generation, as it's called in Australia. We had there a prime minister who was very resistant, who said, you know, that's the past. We're not responsible for it as modern Australians. And then you had a groundswell in Australia. They have a National Sorry Day. And every year on National Sorry Day, local organizations like this Kawartha organization organizes events with Aboriginal communities, right? Let's get together, let's play softball, let's know each other, let's try to cooperate on a daily basis throughout the year to make things better for you and to make things better for us.
Having a good big heart is not enough. We need to act as individuals, as a caring and just society, and as a country.
I mean, Mulroney remember how proud he was that he would get up every morning in the Prime Minister's residence and sort of shake his fist at the South African ambassador's residence across the street and say, we'll fix you guys. That's what we need. We need national resolve. We need non-Aboriginal people to join in.
We need to invest, all of us together, in helping Canadians understand that the Indian residential school history and legacy is Canadian history and Canadian legacy. It belongs to all of us.
Not about Aboriginal people in an important way, of course it is. It's about recognizing as Canadians, this is our history.
It's a daunting task when you think of healing a nation, but if everybody put their minds towards healing, you know, and going through those ceremonies and learning, you know, it will help a lot.
All Canadians have a responsibility to learn the history, to remember it, and to take action based upon it.
They didn't build the schools, we did. They didn't run them badly, we did. They didn't decide that they should have their cultures and languages and spirituality erased, we did. And unless we as non-Aboriginal people join in, there's not going to be a better future for Canadians and for Aboriginal people. You know, it will be, in a sense, one hand clapping.
Kesmoa begware begis inuge Kengi guinari asusultisni Kospemel sibul asudmisni gu One gammo wejin doltibusni Keidudisnek tandel mimajun sidi Wabe guare begis in kek Kedua be masen wejinu En mie wasen glabiski Sivagualede Yanu jigisi bugualade Kemudem telarek sebagualede Bogo chinai nestuari busni tango wedel gamik stutlisni Kunjan chijina kina muane kun megide no delin ulti Unta gold no mudamo nire unta gold no Kun midish tandelolti Okchidudish tandelolti Negamogisi da Wabegware mawegwa muagwi Vijabajata tango Kemudu muksigu Muane kunjan chijina monta godmneo delino ti negidel sutne maradel debmu tangi chinai del ded midi til janna me gidol tida que squecha di da magis kuamagi abajaru da tango oi gilgamur muksigu illa duda tamo el tenu wa be wa re mano gugis tuagu abajala dal ta wi sunmual kisim sara